Welcome. So wonderful to be here with you all. We're going to start with some questions that I have for our esteemed guests, but I want to just kind of put the word out that we're hoping that you all will ask some questions too. So start thinking about them. We're going to have some mic handlers coming around a bit later on. So we're going to jump right in, and I'm going to actually start with you, Chair Burrows. A recent analysis of diversity in the tech industry from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission had some rather dispiriting conclusions. It found that racial diversity has only slightly improved over the last 2 decades in tech, and that women still make up less than a quarter of tech workers, which is basically the same as in 2005. That's far less than their representation in the workforce at large, which is closer to 50%. I wonder if I could ask you, Chair Burrows, to kind of set us up in this conversation. You've called this like a snapshot of the industry.
That's right. We had a lot of interest in the tech industry in particular because it has been growing jobs. That's great news. And we had done in 2016 a snapshot of the industry and diversity therein. So unfortunately, what we found when we came back and did this, going up to 2022 data, and the report's title kind of tells you the bottom line, high tech, low inclusion. So while there was a lot of growth and a lot of hiring, what you saw was that the needle moved only a little bit since 2005 to 2022. So women, although they are almost half of the workforce in the United States, are only about 22 to 23% of those who are working in the high-tech workforce and also in the high-tech sector. And by that I mean industries that have a fairly large concentration of tech workers. At the same time, we did see some, unfortunately, very modest, but some improvement for people of color, vastly underrepresented for Latinos and for African Americans. African Americans are about 12% of the workforce, a little, right around just under 7% is what we found with respect to the workforce and the tech sector, the tech workforce and the tech company sector of the industries as well. With Latinos, we saw some more progress over the last 2 decades, but still very underrepresented. We're talking about 9.9% of tech workers and in the tech workforce, and then they're, of course, something like 18.7% of the entire US workforce. So there's still some work to do, and because we are the primary agency charged with looking for discrimination, we are thinking about this in a whole host of different ways, and to really understand what is going on with the industry. What I will say is that we're 60 years on since the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and since our agency was created. Our anniversary is next year. And so we see this as there has been progress, and I mean that very sincerely, but we have a long way to go. And I'll stop there because I'm excited for the conversation.
So I'm going to actually turn now to Lindsay-Rae and Beck. You guys have been both working on this issue and kind of living it for many years now. I wonder if you could add some nuance to these pretty stark numbers that we're hearing from Chair Burrows. Are you seeing differences across tech in different sectors? Are there any outliers or success stories that you could point to, and what can we learn from those?
Yeah, I think if I pick up where Chair Burrows sort of started the conversation, at Microsoft, we're going to be 50 next year, right? And if we look at sort of the example of women in tech, we have not yet published our recent report that will come out later this month, but women representation in tech roles alone is at 27%, which is above the averages that were just mentioned, and women for the company are over 31%. And that's on purpose, right? That we've been able to slowly grow, year over year for at least the last 5 years. But it's as a result of a holistic strategy and in partnership with many partners, customers, not-for-profit organizations that are in our broader ecosystem so that we can grow the workforce, not only sort of bringing people into tech, inviting folks into the technology profession who maybe wouldn't have considered tech otherwise, but then making sure that once they arrive in tech, we are growing them intentionally and investing in their careers and their mentorship and their sponsorship so they can stay and thrive in tech. And I would just add that, it's part of our business, right? That having representation in the technology industry allows us to create products that people love. And so when you look at sort of Microsoft's evolution from software to hardware to cloud to now AI, being able to advance representation along the way through those industry shifts has, been really bolted to the fact that, for Microsoft, we have this huge inclusive mission that, calls on us to empower the people and organizations on the planet. And we can't do that without representation inside Microsoft too.
Do you want to weigh in on this one?
I will. I think similarly to our friends at Microsoft, our commitment to inclusion and diversity is central to the business strategy. And I think that's a key takeaway for all of us, that we have to be thinking of how does this tie to our business results. For us, thinking about just 10 years ago, really moving to a skills-driven organization because we wanted to be the leading provider of digital-related services. That meant we would have to recruit differently and build our workforce differently in order to achieve that. So we set alongside that ambition, the ambition to be the most inclusive and diverse company in the world. Now, a great example of that is in India, where we were in hyper-growth, breaking through the myth that there weren't women available for those tech-driven roles. And at that time, maybe 31% women in our workforce to today, over 49%. And just this year, we reached 50-50 parity in our Accenture technology centers for women. And that required thinking differently about recruiting, measuring the recruitment process and our performance achievement process for equity, right? Were people experiencing an equitable outcome? And then really focusing on our culture and the ways that we support people to be successful, listening to them. What do they need in order to thrive? If it's returnships for women coming back into the workforce, better parental policies, better flex work policies, whatever's going to actually help them thrive in that role.
Yeah, I mean, hearing both of you talk, it's this is such difficult work. It's difficult work to do, and it's difficult work to express, to explain. Sometimes success can be kind of incremental, and yet it's still important. One of the big questions swirling around today, not just on this panel, in the whole country, and the panel previous to us, is do these efforts work? Does being intentional about DEI and ESG more broadly make any difference? I wonder if you could talk about some of the biggest challenges, both in doing and in showing this work. And I would love for Chair Burrows as well to weigh in on this.
You want me to start? Sure.
Yeah, sure.
So what I would say is the federal government obviously is a national employer. We're, I think, the biggest employer in the United States. And we also believe that this is important to our mission. So what does work, and I want to be clear, even though I gave you some, not happy news at the beginning, that this does work. And one of the things that particularly, and you intuitively you know this, but what we have also found and what research has found is that everybody does better if they feel respected and valued in the workplace, and they're given those tools to really contribute. And that's how, as an employer, and I'm speaking both as someone who has been working in civil rights and employment for a long time, but also as the head of a roughly 2,300 person organization, that gets people able to contribute and do well. And we have seen that over and over. Our mission makes it easy to bring people in for a diverse group of folks really interested in our work, but to keep them there and keep them feeling like they are valued and contributing, that takes more. And so I do want to make sure that, notwithstanding that I think that there are some difficulties, that this does work, and it's really important, I think, in this moment. I know there's a lot of pushback to understand that and to stay the course. Whether it be a diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility program, or whatever one is calling it, to be intentional about making sure you get the best talent in the door and make sure that they all feel included and able to contribute.
I would add that, it does work, but it does require strategic patience and operational urgency, right? That making sure that, at least when I look at Microsoft's journey, the work that we do in partnership with schools as early as middle school up through high school and university, and then reimagining those on-ramps to tech for adults who want to have a career change, all of those pieces of the puzzle really matter. And it is the totality of the system, as well as the many things that sort of you and Beck both pointed to, that allow progress to be made, right? And I think it's, at least for us, it is about really learning and listening to sort of the employee experience and the ways in which people are feeling like they do have access and opportunity or not, and then really thinking creatively and collaboratively. I mean, the beautiful thing about this work is that, you know, we all partner with so many of our peers and our colleagues across industries, across, you know, small companies, large companies, to try and make progress together. And I think it's something that's really special about sort of this work, because it does require all of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, you know, I'll add just that I think it is important to be evidence-based, right? To have the receipts. And
Right.
for us, that's thinking about the measurement of our progress. And I know that this works because I can measure it. And we think really holistically about the quantitative and qualitative data we need to know whether what we're doing is working or not, and adjust our approach accordingly.
Right.
The only thing I would add is, you know, Accenture and other companies, Microsoft, we do release our data, right? And so the transparency and accountability to point on places where we are making progress, but also to be accountable where we know we have more to do, I think is really important. You know, as I said, we're about to publish for, you know, the 6th year our D&I report, but 11 years, you know, consistently. And I think that that's part of the rhythm of being able to keep the conversation moving.
Right, right. And as you say, it's the areas for improvement as well as the successes, right? And the learnings from failures sometimes too.
For sure.
I wonder if we could open this up. We have some mic handlers here, and if anyone has a question for our esteemed panelists, we would love to hear from the rest of you. If we don't have any questions, I also have more questions. Lindsay-Rae, you touched on the need for kind of a collective, or at least like collaboration across industries. I know that, Beck, this is something that you've thought a lot about also. When we're facing these kind of these huge intractable problems, do you see potential for collaboration across industries, or for sharing of some of those learnings that we've been talking about?
I mean, I would say absolutely, right? As a company who's been doing this work for 4 decades, I often look to smaller organizations to see how they're innovating with sort of less of a legacy or less history, because they can do innovative, creative things that big companies can't.
Right.
And then I have the opportunity to also share, you know, decades of learning and best practices that would benefit smaller companies or places to start around data or learning, or, you know, sort of transparency motions, engagement of senior leadership and grassroots. And so, you know, it really is that sharing of information and sort of wisdom and creativity that I think keeps the conversation fresh.
Well, and Lindsay-Rae is on the top of my text chain, so, you know. But I would say, you know, it is that collaboration. It's a space where the natural competition of companies can be suppressed a little bit, because we are invested in what is, you know, societal good as well as good for our businesses. And, you know, we look at things like what you've done at Microsoft, Lindsay-Rae, with accessibility, and how widely you share that so that all of us can learn. You know, that's really appreciated, that leadership role and that sharing and collaboration. Or a project that our companies undertook together with the Prince's Trust. Like, we have to think about NGOs and governments and how we partner together. In the UK, we looked at, you know, how is generative AI going to impact the youth population? And from that, we've been able to create a project that's going to skill up 1 million folks in the UK from socioeconomically disadvantaged communities to use Gen AI to build their skills, to have mentorship, but also to use those tools to get their jobs.
Right,
And
right.
so it's that collaborative energy that allows us to do that. Singularly, we wouldn't be able to do that on our own.
Yeah.
I love that you brought up skill upping. It's obviously an issue not just for the next generation, but for those of us already in decades into our careers who might need some retraining or upskilling. How do you think about that challenge for this AI-driven era?
Well, for us, I think the first question we ask anybody coming to Accenture is, what was the last thing you learned? And we do that because learning is so critical to staying relevant in our field, and we want people who have both an appetite and an ambition for learning. It doesn't matter if what you learned was Python or generative AI or how to play Chapel Roan on the guitar. It just really doesn't matter. What is important is that appetite for learning, because we know that the talent market is constrained, as Chair Burrows' research shows, but we're not constrained. We can invest, we can skill, we can grow the skills that we need to drive the business forward and
Right.
keep everyone skill relevant. And at the pace of change we're in, it's hypercritical. You can't allow people to lag in their skills.
Well, and to add on to Beck's point, I would say, like, it's not only important that tech workers get upskilled and reskilled on the new era of AI, but we will only be successful if everybody has access and benefits from that technology. It's part of why we need representation in the engineering of AI, but also access to. And so you see corporate partnerships on, making sure that we continue to invest in broadband and access to devices and access to digital skilling beyond the workplace through LinkedIn Learning and other platforms, because I think, like Accenture, there are lots of companies who are deeply committed to making sure that this next era of tech really does leapfrog inclusion so more people benefit.
Absolutely.
And if I could just add on that, the EEOC I launched in 2021, an initiative looking at artificial intelligence and how that is affecting employment, both in terms of recruitment, et cetera, but also this question of, the entire lifeline, and making sure, that as AI becomes more important and to how we work, the people who get the opportunity to learn how to use these new tools in their jobs will have a running start. So as those opportunities, who gets trained in an institution, an organization, really matters to the future of their ability to succeed, to being, able to contribute, and for the organization to get that talent from everybody. And so that's another thing that we're looking at and reminding people about. But we've also done a couple of quick documents that are on our website, eoc.gov, on disabilities, and I'm so glad you raised that, and how to make sure that as you use AI, particularly for recruitment, that you don't leave people out, don't leave talent on the table unintentionally with disability issues, and then also for race, gender, national origin, religion, under Title VII, as well as color, I guess.
I love that note to end on, that don't leave talent on the table. So I would like to thank so much our esteemed panelists and the audience for your engagement with these super important issues going forward.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So grateful for you.